Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our December Willis Long and Friends edition. And we're really thrilled that you've all been joining us. And again, I'm thrilled to welcome my dear friend Dana Long, who's my co-host, a primary care pediatrician at UCSF, Benioff Children's, and co-director of the Center for Child and Community Health. She keeps me grounded, in the reality of everyday life for families and pediatric providers in Oakland. So Dana, you want to welcome?
Speaking of keeping you grounded, I am calling from our pediatric clinic in Oakland, and I have a very lively toddler next door to me. So if you hear some toddler noises in the background, that's why. It's so lovely to be here on Willis Long and Friends. We are a monthly live stream series that's hosted by David and I. The goal of Willis and Friends is to explore intentional and thought-provoking efforts to advance early relational health in family health transformation and in communities. The goal of this conversation is to be fun and lively and to help us all understand what is happening across the country in the early childhood field to improve child and health well-being. So our experts are here today to share their personal narratives, their innovative pilots, their programming, groundbreaking research, and advocacy efforts. We all can learn from our experts and ideally try those innovations where we live and help to scale the field of early relational health.
Excellent. And you're exactly right. We have some wonderful guests today. Let me introduce them first, and then we'll get into the meat of our wonderful conversation. Ellie Erickson is a pediatrician at Duke University. Over the last 10 years, Dr. Erickson has focused on her career on clinical care and promotion of early relational health in clinical spaces, with a focus on how literacy and reading with young children can promote healthy attachment and development. She serves as the medical director for Duke's Reach Out and Read program for the last 8 years, successful grant applications to support research and literacy interventions in the newborn period. And how I've come to know her is how she's been honored as the inaugural Early Relational Health Fellow for Reach Out and Read, which is phenomenal. She was elected to serve as the co-lead for the Carolinas Collaborative, a cohort of academic pediatric residency programs in North and South Carolina, all dedicated to promoting advocacy, education, and pediatric residency program. But most of all, she's deeply dedicated to this relational health movement, helping families and children thrive. So, Ellie, it's a joy to work together. It's a joy to have you joining us here. And you brought along two dear friends that I'll introduce, and you may wish to say more about them as you know them too. Cate Elander is Durham County's early childhood coordinator. She focuses on aligning the county's approach to early childhood programming, policy, and investment, birth to 8, and strengthening the county's collaboration with early childhood systems building. Before being at the Durham County, Cate spent 4 years at MDC, providing strategic guidance and implementation to support philanthropic investments in early childhood systems, family economic security, and equity in North Carolina. Before that, her roles as community organizer, home visitor, outreach coordinator at community-based organizations in Durham, Delaware, New York, all of which have had her strengthen her commitments to community co-design, power sharing, racial and equity social justice. She has an MA in urban affairs and public policy, specialization in community development from the University of Delaware. That's my alma mater, by the way. And a BA in American Studies from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So, Cate, we'll have to talk about the blue hens here too, I think, right?
And small but mighty.
And then Joy Lampkin Foster is a mama, a doula, and a community advocate. Joy's focuses her work on empowering families and self-advocacy tools and on reclaiming the village as a key part of combating life stresses that disproportionately impact Black families. She's the founder of the Endaya, I hope I said that right, company, which provides consulting in the intersection of leadership, equity, and reproductive justice for organizational leaders and collective impact projects. She serves on the advisory board of NAMI, I think I have that right, an advisory board member of UNC Birth Partners, and is currently leading Durham's Early Childhood Action Plan, the first of its kind to roll up on a comprehensive plan for areas of social and emotional health, physical health, economic security, and education for Durham's young children, which we want to hear about. She's a mama. She enjoys spending time with her little ones. In 2021, she started a story time amidst the pandemic to provide a safe space for Black families across Durham to come together, read, play, build positive relationships, and connect to resources and families. That's all about that relational health, and it's really deeply local within Durham County. We're eager to hear about all that today. So Dana, do you want to get us started with how we get our conversation going, please?
Absolutely. This conversation highlights for us that good work is often very local and is led by community members who understand the unique context of their environment. And Durham County, I'm putting it out there, has long recognized the importance of really creating perinatal supports to support birthing people, and doing so in a community co-designed fashion with families to present early relational health. And so I'm excited for you all to share your learnings with us. And to get us started, we are hoping that each of you can tell us more about yourselves, about your personal journeys, about what you're most passionate about in this field. And as you answer, we have time, so we want to get to know you. And Joy, I would love to invite you to go first. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you so much, Dana. And thank you to everyone who's here. Just excited to be a part of this conversation. I also have a toddler right next to me. So you may hear T-Rex noises throughout this recording. And I thank you all for welcoming Noah into this space as well. But yeah, I'm a mom first and foremost. I have a 3-year-old. And about maybe 8-9 years ago now, I started exploring this idea of becoming a doula. So this was like way before I became a parent myself. But was just very moved by this idea that I could do something so impactful and powerful just by being present with another person. Like as doulas, that's really the crux of what we do. We sit there with people during some of the most challenging or transformative or exciting moments of their lives, and we just hold space for all of that energy. And so I found it to be really profound, this idea that like I don't have to do anything but show up and just be kind and present, and that it can actually, we know through research that's been done, and we know that it makes a difference to people's birth outcomes. So I thought, how incredible is that? And I don't have to, wait for a policy to be passed or years and years of research to be done for me to show up right now and make a difference on maternal health and in people's birth outcomes. So that was kind of my entry point to social emotional health and relational health. I was also fortunate to grow up with my mom, who is a social worker. And so I think some of that was just ingrained in me, this idea that we can hold space for people and be there for people, and it makes a real measurable difference in their well-being and in their lives. So yes, but I've been really fortunate to be able to be here in Durham. I've been in Durham for about 10 years in total now, and have just been so fortunate to cross paths with Cate and with Ellie and others who are like-minded individuals who really want to put equity and anti-racism front and center to the work that we do. I didn't start out being focused on Black maternal health. I just was really interested in how do I help people have more empowered birth experiences. But over the course, about 2 or 3 years into my doula work, I realized things are playing out very differently for families of color, particularly Black folks. And as a Black woman, I felt like it is imperative for me to figure out how to make a difference to that. So I'll pause there, but happy to answer any questions and excited to hear from my colleagues on this call as well.
Thank you so much, Joy, for sharing a piece of yourself with us. Cate, would you like to go next? Tell us about yourself, about your journey, what you're most passionate about.
Sure. Thank you all so much for having me. This is a wonderful way to kind of wrap up the year. I'm grateful. I think I'll start by sharing that when I was younger, much younger, we'll just go way back, we moved around quite a bit, my family. We moved to new towns when I was 2, 6, 10, and 12, and landed in Durham when I was in the 7th grade. And I think having warm, affectionate, open relationships with my parents and also with my grandmother was a really important part of my ability to kind of manage those transitions. My mom used to say a quote that's like on, mugs everywhere: bloom where you are planted. And what I didn't know then, but that I understand very deeply now, is that early relational health is key to being able to do that, like to be able to thrive even when things are challenging or there's a lot of transitions in your life. I'm also a mom and an aunt times 5. And caring for my kiddos and supporting my nephews has taught me a lot. I'll say that dropping my child off at childcare when he was 12 weeks old was one of the most difficult things I've ever done as a parent. And handing him to someone who I'd only met once, pumping breast milk in my office, like washing bottles every single night after bedtime. I came close to quitting work multiple times in those first few months, not because I didn't enjoy the work that I was doing, but because it felt so off to be leaving my child with someone else during the day, especially as he was starting to wake up and engage with the world. And I'll just say for the record, I'm sure everyone who's tuning in would agree. But if we could do one thing for early relational health right now, I feel like it would be learning from our neighbors and providing 6 months of paid leave to birthing people and to their partners. So for a casual Daniel Tiger reference, my career path started out as wanting to be one of the helpers. Early on, I worked as a community organizer and an outreach worker and a home visitor. I really wanted to help people living in marginalized communities get access to resources to address what I understood to be like intentional disparities in access and support. And while that work was really meaningful to me, I think there were probably some eye rolls, like as I closed the door on my way out from the people I was working with, because I really didn't have the lived experience to qualify me for those roles, to be honest. And so I've spent some time reflecting on that. And as a white woman with relative economic privilege, I've been kind of grappling with what I feel like my role should be in ensuring that families and communities are supported. So I've begun advocating for direct, unrestricted cash assistance for families with young children because we know the impact of economic instability on early relational health. I've moved more toward roles that allow me to kind of leverage my relative power to influence institutional partners. I try to focus on modeling what power sharing looks like, raising money for community-rooted groups to do that work that I did when I was younger and that I thought was right for me to do, but I'm not sure it really was now, to allow folks in their own communities to do that work. I also continue to grapple with whether or not I should be working within institutions to press for change, or whether I should be working outside of institutions with less access to power, but more freedom to press. So I guess I'll just wrap up by saying either way, I think has been really important to me to be in real reciprocal relationships with people living and doing this work of early relational health and family support, people like Joy and Ellie. And I have a ton of gratitude for all that I have learned with them and others that are doing the collaborative work with us. Thanks.
Thanks, Cate, for sharing. And as you were talking, I had a flashback to being a new mom with my 3rd kid and being a busy pediatrician in a clinic there's no pumping breaks, there's no pumping space. There are joint shared offices. And so in between patients, putting on my breast pump, trying to chart and answer phones, and sharing the office with a male colleague. And it just was what it was. Okay. Ellie, would you please sort of tell us a little bit more about yourself, about your journey, what you're most passionate about?
Absolutely. I can also share that reflection on the pumping stories, because I have also been there and pumped pretty much all over my clinic and the hospital in various times. So I am a general pediatrician at Duke. You may also notice that like behind me is this like white, kind of line back here. This is my daughter's crib. So I am also a mom to a 2.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. So my 2.5-year-old has not jumped the crib yet. And so we are keeping her as long as possible in there. So I have a, pandemic baby, which has been in and of itself a really interesting experience. But like Cate, I'd like to go back early. I am the child of 2 book editors. And so books were always a really big part of my life growing up. My earliest and fondest memories of my family are reading together and all kinds of shared reading. And so that has always been, I think, at the heart of everything that I do, is just trying in every way that I can, in every avenue that I can, to really elevate the sacred space of reading with young children. I really do feel that it's a sacred space. And so the ways that we can share and elevate that in all places is kind of like my North Star. So I was a very traditional English history theater kid. No one saw me going to medicine. Again, my parents are book editors, so this was like a very strange thing. And then in undergrad, I took a medical ethics class and learned kind of about stories and the way that medicine and really the practice of medicine is more to do with learning and understanding the complexity of people's stories and how that fits into the context of their overall life. So again, the theme of books and stories and understanding stories and curiosity about people has always been kind of at the heart of everything that I've done. So I kind of, pushed my way through medical school. And, people would be saying, I remember that from biochem in college. And I was like, I didn't learn biochemistry in my medieval Spanish literature course, but okay, here we go. And in residency in pediatrics, learned about the Reach Out and Read program. And that was a really crystallizing moment for me of understanding that, oh, wow, this, some of my greatest loves of pediatric care and caring for young children and families with young children can also be connected with reading and shared reading. So that's kind of how those things came together for me in my career. And then slowly the unfolding of understanding, I think, again, that Reach Out and Read was more than just book provision, right? It wasn't just, here's a book, hooray, you finished your pediatric visit. But it also provided a way to, connect with families and to do the pediatric primary care visit in a different way, right? By starting my visit by walking into a room and handing a child or a family a book and talking about that book. And for that to be the start of our visit and the way that we were all able to connect in that room was just something really different than I'd ever seen before. And really, brought me closer to that understanding that what we're doing in medicine is really, we have the privilege to connect with people and families on a really deep human level. And some of that, so much of that has been, I think, lost in the way that we are ending up having to practice medicine now. So that was kind of, the start of things. And I was, really excited about things and, advocating and this and that. And then I had kids, and it's like going to Oz, where suddenly everything is in Technicolor and you just think, oh my gosh, this is like, and I suddenly looked at all these folks who'd either birthed children or had young children, and just thought, like, how are you all just out here, like, getting dressed and showing up and doing all your work and on calls? And I wrote handwritten letters to all of my friends who'd been through this before, and I was just like, I didn't know. I didn't know that this is what it was. And so again, and I had a doula with us for both of our births, which, I could talk about just that experience forever. And again, just that shift in priorities of Cate, your story about that dissonance of, like, what am I doing here when my kids are somewhere else? And how are we integrating all the parts of ourselves in our work and in our, identities and the way we show up, I think has really reinforced and given a different cadence and energy to the passion I feel for supporting families with young children. Again, I'm a pediatrician and I have 2 little kids, so of course I have a cough right now. But that's kind of how I got to where I am. And again, just wanting to pull whatever levers, find whatever platforms, be in any space that I can to really share the message that the success of our children is based on the quality and depth of the relationships that they have with the people around them. I had a conversation with a family in clinic this morning about that very thing. And it was tearful, and there was a lot of crying. There was a lot of emotion. But those are the conversations that we need to be having in as many different places as we can.
Thank you so much for that, Ellie. I would like to stick with you for a moment. And can you tell us more about the work that you're doing in collaboration in Durham?
Yes. So I can speak to a part of it. But again, I really, cannot emphasize enough that I am a small part of this work. And one of the things, again, that I think that we are realizing more and more is that my time with families and the experience that I have with families is a very small part of their lives, right? I see families for, 15 to 30 minutes every couple of months. Yes, it's often, but there are a lot of hours and a lot of life to live in between the times that I see families. And so I think that, just recognizing that healthcare and the health system is a really, really small part of people's overall lives, if we are lucky to not have to be seeking medical care frequently. So with all that said, the first part, and I think the core of my work, is in my clinical care. So again, making sure that when I am in the nursery working with families with new babies, when I am in clinic seeing families with young children, toddlers, that the core of what I'm doing in those visits is talking about and engaging with families in conversations about emotional connection with their children. So that I feel like is one of my primary places. The other section of that is my work with Reach Out and Read. And so as David said in his kind introduction, I've been running our Reach Out and Read program for the last 8 years. And the narrative of Reach Out and Read in the time that I've been doing this has really changed from a, give books to kids so that parents will read and they'll hear a lot of words and then they'll learn words and then they'll go to school and, do school well. And we're realizing more and more that that's really just the tip of the iceberg. And probably the thing that is creating the impact is more about the connections that are created between a child and their caregiver when there's shared reading happening, right? So the book is a prop; it's a catalyst for connection. It's not. It is the thing, right? So hearing words is important and everything else, but it's really more about that that time that families and children have together of feeling safe and connected. And so my job as the inaugural early relational health fellow at Reach Out and Read is to just find a whole bunch of different ways to further that message, elevate that message as much as I can across systems where, again, the focus in medical care for young children is often like word acquisition, right? Like how many words does your kid know? And that's great. I mean, it's fun to like show off tricks for, oh, my daughter can say like her favorite word right now is actually. And, she's 2.5 and it's hilarious. Because she'll say, actually, mama, purple shirt. And that's cute, but it's not about her word acquisition that she can say actually. It's about the fact that she is communicating with me so effectively and feels safe enough to kind of say like, actually, this is what I want to do. And so trying to shift the focus away from some of those metrics about, word acquisition and kind of basic development to, well, how are we actually relating with children in the home? How are they, what is their behavior? How are families interpreting their behavior? That kind of thing. And I really think we can get at that message through conversations about book sharing. And so through that work, I have also been working with a number of other colleagues in my area, Debbie Best, one of them in particular who I work with very closely, and just sort of continuing to realize all of these things that we've been working on, all of these kind of the underlying foundation of all of it has been early relational health. And how do we support child health by supporting the families and environments in which they are thriving? And so that has connected to a number of different community efforts. And again, these community efforts were happening far beyond and before, I knocked on anyone's door and said, hey, I'd like to join you. But so thinking again about the Early Childhood Action Plan, which I'm so excited for Cate and Joy to talk about, and working with Durham's Partnership for Children, working with Family Connects Durham, which is our home visiting program, and just again, kind of connecting all of these places together to have a unified effort towards supporting families and communities in Durham. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it over, is that I think that one of the things that we often miss in conversations about supporting children is that it's not enough to support children without supporting the families and communities in which they live. I think that sometimes we skip and we want to give directly to the children, which sounds great. And children cannot have agency without their families and communities being supported. And so I think that that's really been one of the strongest messages within all of our work and within Durham, is that children thrive when community thrives, and children thrive when their caregivers thrive. And I really do feel that that has been at the heart and the foundation of all of the work, which has made the work in Durham really different. So yeah, that's kind of where all of my work is headed.
Thank you. I do want to invite Joy to the conversation to share, and then you, Cate, tell us about the collaborations going on in Durham right now.
Yeah, first of all, let me just say, I'm probably making a ton of funny faces over here because I'm just taking it all in. Like my brain is just going in all these different places, just listening to Ellie and Cate. And it's great just to be able to like continuously reflect on these things and just see all the connections between our work. Where my brain goes with that question is kind of thinking of like community rooted work that's happening on the ground. Community rooted is a term that has been coined by an organization here in Durham called Communities in Partnership. And it's been a very important idea for us, thinking about what it means for an organization not to just be community-based, but community-rooted, or an initiative to be not just community-based, but community-rooted. And community-rooted means that the folks who are creating and leading the initiative are the people who are being served by that initiative. So when we think of an organization such as MAME, which was mentioned in my introduction, it's Black mothers who are living in Durham who are leading the organization, but they are also serving Black mothers who are living in Durham. And so this is very important because oftentimes we have funding and resources go to institutions that are oftentimes not community rooted. And so they are disconnected really from the realities and the issues of what's happening on the ground and in people's actual lives. And so we try to focus, I think, in the collaborative work that I'm doing, we have tried to focus on making sure that we center and uplift community rooted issues. We say that those who are closest to the problems are also closest to the solutions. And this is central to our approach. I think there's a couple of different types of collaborations that come to mind for me. So there are community rooted organizations coming together in coalitions and really supporting one another. And this is important. And then there's also this work with more heavily supported organizations, institutional partners such as Duke Health, such as organizations and nonprofits that typically are white led and typically get more funding, coming together with Black led or brown led community rooted organizations that are oftentimes overlooked, don't get funding. And so those are also collaborations as well. And I think it's been interesting to kind of have people walk on these, like what I imagine are very personal journeys to figure out, what does it look like to be a real ally? What does it look like to be an actual co-conspirator and not just sit on the sidelines in this quest for true anti-racism to be realized? What does it look like to actually do power sharing in my personal and professional life? And having to reflect both on a personal and institutional level about these things. And I've just been grateful that people are open-minded to the conversations, open-minded to being on that journey, because if you have a certain level of privilege and power, quite frankly, you don't have to be on that journey. It's a choice that some people are making. And on the flip side, it's been also really uplifting to see communities of color and other communities that are typically marginalized recognizing their own power and saying, hey, like, no, we do deserve to be in this space. Hey, we do deserve to have more funding. Hey, our communities do deserve and are worthy of having access just like others. And in fact, we should be at the helm of these movements and of these initiatives that are supposed to be here to correct injustices that have been going on for decades, really centuries, and now have manifested in these different ways in our current present day lives. And so it's just been, really a spiritual journey for me, and I'm sure for other people, to kind of come to like face all these different issues within ourselves, right? Seeing what our roles are, recognizing our own power, and how we come together to improve life for everyone, recognizing everyone's humanity who is involved in the process, right? Like it's hard to be a person with privilege or power to a certain degree and have to come to grips with the ways that you may or may not have been complicit. I listened to Cate talk about her own journey with that, right? And her own reflection. So that's, I can recognize her humanity in that, right? And I can recognize the humanity in maybe a cash poor mother who's realizing like, oh no, like for the first time, I'm realizing I deserve to be here and it shouldn't just be a part of a focus group where I get a $25 gift card. Like, no, like I should actually be at the front and center of this movement. So it's been very powerful and lots of lessons.
I think both David and I are smiling because we so fervently agree with everything that you're saying. Cate, you had mentioned um, the Early Childhood Action Plan, and can you tell us just more about that?
Absolutely, yes. I think so often when institutional partners are thinking about investments that need to be made, they are often like, well, we need to bring like the smart people together and we need to put a plan together, and sometimes that plan sits on a shelf and sometimes that plan is implemented in varying levels of thoroughness or at varying levels of resourcedness. And when I came on board with the county, I found out that they had funded the development of a plan, or they had funded a local community partner to facilitate a process to create the state's first local county based early childhood action plan. And there were a group of us working together on figuring out how to shape an equitable process to develop that plan. And there were people like Joy who, from almost the beginning, were kind of pushing and saying, like, I hear you, but could we do this? Or I hear you, but like, this isn't as equitable as we think it is. We need to do more to elevate the voices of people with lived experience, and not just through focus groups and surveys or through one or two people sitting on a committee. Like, the people who need to be developing this plan are the people who are living these challenges, not the people who are in part creating or perpetuating these challenges. And so what we have tried to do through an imperfect and iterative evolving process is put or create opportunities for people who are living those challenges to really be the deciders about how are funds being allocated, what is the work that we're going to do, and how are we going to do it. And one specific example is we created a steering committee that is a majority parents of young children, majority people with lived experience with some of these persistent challenges in the early childhood space, and a majority long-term residents of Durham. And we've set up the voting structure for decision-making to prioritize those voices. So it's like a seat at the table and more power in the voting process. And on another project that we have been involved in, and that Ellie is also involved in, Pediatrics Supporting Parents, they took the Early Childhood Action Plan Steering Committee governance structure and used that to inform their governance structure for the Pediatrics Supporting Parents initiative. And that, I think, was just it felt like a win. Like, okay, people are starting to realize why this is important. And again, there's more that needs to happen. But I'm feeling excited about that work. And I'll just share one other quick thing. We're also starting to see, I think, funders and more traditional organizations being more willing to pay folks with lived experience directly to lead research related to these challenges, which I think has been really exciting. An organization called Village of Wisdom invested in parents early on in the pandemic to do that work. ISLA, which is a local organization focused on kind of supporting Latinx parents with young children, has also just done that work, talking to parents with lived experience, talking to parents also experiencing the challenges in the early childhood system, and then being able to say to funders and policymakers, the problem isn't we're having trouble recruiting parents for the program. The problem is the program. we need to change the way the program is structured. We don't need to change our recruitment strategy. We need to change, these structural challenges. So that's one piece of the work that I've been really excited about with the Early Childhood Action Plan, and also watching across the community before the Early Childhood Action Plan work was even happening, other folks working in that way to share power with people experiencing those challenges.
Phenomenal. I'm, as Dana, smiling deeply, heartfelt at so many levels. I'm thinking about the incredible disruptive leadership and then discovery journey, and keenly aware of that's a journey and it's not easy. And Cate, I'm going back to where you began, sharing a couple of thoughts that just jumped out to me that I'd like you to expand more on. And one is, of course, the structural barriers of poverty and the structural barriers of not enough time are huge barriers that we're all wrestling with, and for many families, deeply, painfully so. And we know how they've been built, why they were built, and how they still play a big role. That's my first thought. My second thought is your struggle that you alluded to, which I think a lot about, and that is, where do I position my influence? And the balance between power sharing and then being an ally or a learning or a humble position versus the privilege of power and how to use it and how that plays out. For example, like the PSP Governance Committee, because you're looking right into a big health system that's flying away. Clinical, and I'm curious how you're thinking about that and what's emergent. What are you starting to see? Joy, I'm right with you about the doula care transformational experience that's so deeply relational and also historically right to how that plays in. I was so struck by that. Ellie, you and I talked a lot about all of this. But Cate, I'm curious how you're thinking about power dynamic sharing into a health system around PSP with a governance structure you've created, yet big structural barriers that make it really challenging, and how you're thinking about cracking those open in a social justice way. I'd like to hear your riffing there.
That's a very big question, David. Let's see. I think, I mean, it's all about power, right? And there are communities that have had more of it and institutions that have had more of it and communities that have had a lot less of it or none. No power given to them. They've had their own power, but no power offered to them. And I think trying to do what is possible to push the boundaries around the structures for decision making, like as I was saying earlier, to place power or priority in the hands of people who are directly experiencing those challenges, I think is something we've been able to do with the Early Childhood Action Plan Steering Committee, the Grown in Durham Steering Committee. And it's something that I think PSP has used as inspiration. And I think, we're still having to bring what is coming from that steering committee or that governance committee to funders to approve or to policymakers to do what they want with. And we don't have power over what they'll do with this information. And so I think in order to stay sane, I think I try hard to think a little bit more about, like, what are the structural, how can we bake it in so that we're not already delivering to a funder solutions that have not been developed or deeply informed by community. And I think that the question about what do you do in the face of these huge mammoth systems to influence those is, I don't have an answer to that question. I'm curious about what Ellie or Joy think. And I guess the last thing I'll say before sharing the floor, going back to the first part of your question around, like, thinking about economic privilege or the lack thereof. Yeah. When I dropped my child off at childcare at 12 weeks old, it was after 6 weeks of paid leave and 6 weeks of unpaid leave. And my partner, who works in software development, had 12 weeks of paid leave, which is, I mean, he had more paid leave than I had, which is kind of shocking. And that amount of paid leave was barely enough for him. And we could afford, for that reason, for me to take the 6 weeks of unpaid leave. And I think about how there are so many people who have zero access to paid leave in this country, and they are taking their child to childcare or to a family member or neighbor's house at 1 week or 2 weeks old. And the amount of stress that places on a baby and places on their parents is, my body is having chills just saying the words, because I can't, it was so hard for me at 12 weeks with economic privilege and with knowing that if I had decided to quit my job, it would have been okay. And it's just very difficult to be in the face of the other side, to think about how to solve that problem. We are literally, as a country, putting parents in a position to not have the resources to do what is deeply ingrained in us and necessary, which is to care for the child that we brought into this world, and do so in a way that is warm and affirming. And it's awful. It's an awful thing that we do. So that's, I answered two questions that are connected or not.
No,
I don't know.
You're spot on. And I want to hear from Ellie and Joy. Just adding in, our early relational health movement is mindful of these huge structural barriers, and our policy efforts are to attend to these realities also. And it's a big question. It's a national question. It's a cultural question. But the elevation of voice, the elevation of experience, the elevation of multiple voices, truth to power, however one wishes to do it, is likewise a critical element of advancing a relational health frame. And so I don't want to lose track of that, because it's so real. And you don't want to sugarcoat exactly what's happening for families around the relational health efforts, about the barriers, structural barriers, that make it really, really difficult. So thank you, Cate, for calling that out. Ellie, what are your reactions to this space? And then of course, Joy, because you're in it, you get it. You've talked.
Yeah. So when I think about, so one of the original reasons that we applied for the PSP grant, Pediatric Supporting Parents Grant, to be a proof point community, was to help fund our Healthy Steps program. That was, kind of one of our main things, was thinking about, the sustainability of our program. And so, we thought, okay, great. And we're going to hook into ECAP, and, we're going to connect all these things together. And pretty quickly and thankfully, Joy and Cate were asking us a lot of questions about, why Healthy Steps? And, what is Healthy Steps really doing? And, I'm there and I'm just parroting all my stuff back. And I'm like, well, it's an evidence-based program and blah, blah, blah. And we're helping. And again, through these conversations, I think it's just, we had really hard conversations about, why these programs and why this structure and how to do things. And there have been, so our PSP structure, again, has been, I would say it's ECAP inspired. We have not been able to achieve the same level of community co-design because of some of the restrictions of the grant and some other things. But even within that, it's been really hard for us to reimagine the way we would traditionally structure a grant like this, where normally it would be cool, we're going to think about how the pediatric clinic can support parents in the community, and we're going to come up with our ideas, and we're going to share them, and we're going to do some focus groups, and we're going to ask some parents to join us, and it's going to be great. And that is absolutely not how our group has been functioning, and it has been incredible and also at times really hard. And we've had to have some real conversations and some real vibe checks about, like, we've been calling them vibe checks, of just like, okay, what are all of our agendas? What are our gives and gets here? Why are we all in this space? And what power do we hold? What power can we cede? And I think just learning from each other about, the ways in which we're operating in the systems that we are, right? So in the same way that, Cate is working within government, I work within health system. And so Cate and I have talked about this before, about the ways that, like, I understand that I am an affluent white woman who is the face of a very large healthcare system in many ways. And I also know the many ways that healthcare systems do not prioritize pediatric primary care, as, a large health system is, inclined to do. And so thinking about where I sat in that structure as a person of power and privilege working within the system, but then often feeling like I was operating under a system that wasn't necessarily giving me control and agency to do the things that I felt were right. And really taking time to question the motives of our initiatives and the inherent saviorism that was part of a lot of the work that we were doing. And having to say, okay, this isn't necessarily how I would do it or the way that feels right or comfortable to me. And this is a incredibly valid and ultimately, I think, better way of structuring our project and our program. And we've had, again, a lot of big conversations about this. We've had, people, I'll be honest, like, people leave our group, people have to take a break from our group at times, again, with just like really hard conversations that happen as we're trying to do something in a really, really different way. And so I think that the way we're structuring things is ECAP inspired, because again, I think that the way that ECAP has been able to continue and further their work has been different than what we've been able to do in our space. But I think that it has really led to, and honestly, I hope that this is, beyond whatever programs we're able to have through this grant. I think that just the relationships that we have been able to build and the trust that we are continuing to build between and among each other is really at the heart of where we can, kind of generate impact and start to, you can't boil the ocean, right? So start to shift things toward a place where we at the health system are not making decisions and asking people what they think about it, but we have folks who are experiencing our clinic saying, these are the ways that we want your clinic to operate. And we say, okay, how can we make that happen? So again, it's I think it's been a real success story in a lot of ways, but it's also not been without a lot of growth, and a lot of growth on my part of having to really interrogate where I was placing value in the programs and services that were being provided by our clinic.
Joy, I'd love your reflections similarly about the allyship, the power sharing, the authentic truth brought forth, and the experiences of families kind of participating in this work. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so my mind goes a couple of different places. One, it goes back to, like, for me, like this is the change, like what we're doing right now. Being human, being honest, building relationships with each other. For me, I think that's at the heart of change, right? When people can have a safe space and be like I'll never forget the day where Ellie, I don't know, I texted her, she texted me, I don't know, but it was like, we got to get on a call because there's weird vibes. And Ellie was just so honest. And like, for me, like that just means so much because that maybe it's just me. I feel like we can do so much faster, further, better when we can just be real with each other for a minute. Be honest about why we're here. Be honest about the things that scare us. Be honest about the things that we want. And don't be so worried about like how, like, does this make me a bad person, or how does that look? Like, doesn't mean that we can just show up and be disrespectful and not care about people's feelings and not care about microaggressions and things like that. But if we can find a way to create these spaces where folks feel like, hey, like we can all be honest about some things and why we're here and what our agendas are, like Ellie said, like we can get further faster. It also just takes honesty to be able to do anti-racism work, right? Like we have to be real about the way we're complicit. We have to be honest about, as a Black person, I have to be honest about my own, internalized racism. I have to be, honest about my own journey, right? Like no one's perfect. I have to be honest about the ways in which I have not upheld equity in other realms outside of race, right? Because race is only one facet. There's others, right? When we think about intersectionality, or just simply having other life experiences that I have not lived, right? Like what am I doing, right, to be educated and to be a true ally and co-conspirator to people who would identify differently from me in terms of gender, in terms of ability, etc. And so I think the change is us. And I know that sounds cheesy or whatever, but literally I can't separate institutional and systemic and cultural change from the itty bitty tiny, let's hop on a phone call, those moments, the let's have a conversation, the let's do a vibe check. Hey, like, let me go and sit aside and like really reflect on how I showed up today because something didn't sit well with me. Let me stand up for myself in this moment and be bold in this moment and not just sit back. So it's the little bitty everyday choices that I think causes a ripple effect, and it inspires other people. I think, like Cate said, I think she tries to do a lot of modeling, right? And not that Cate is perfect, right? Not that Ellie is perfect, but I think that having, white folks in this case who will show up and be honest and be like, I'm trying, but I'm not perfect. And I'm like, and just like, that's helpful. That actually creates change. I'll never forget one of our parents. He's a Black father. He was a part of writing the Early Childhood Action Plan. But he, at the end of it, came to me and was like, Joy, this was therapeutic for me to be a part of, first of all, to even be asked, right? Because normally he wouldn't be, to even be asked to be a part of it. But then to have a space where it's a diverse group, like, you're in the room with folks who look differently from you, who are of a different socioeconomic status with you, but hold space for you to be authentic and show up and like speak the way that feels, authentic for you. And you can be a part of doing something important for your community. Like that was therapeutic for him, right? And so that's how we make change is we show up, we are human, we allow other people to be human, and we make mistakes and we grow from them. And I do feel like we're doing culture shifting work. Like it's no doubt in my mind. Like we are changing things with this work.
This is phenomenal. We're needing to begin to close up. Dana, what are your thoughts as we finish up here.
I want to thank all of you for really modeling the behavior that we are speaking truth to and showing up in ways that is authentic to the work. I know that we only have about 30 more seconds, and so I do want to send everybody off with holiday blessings and wishes, and I hope that your next couple weeks are filled with joy and laughter, and that you spend time with your loved ones.
And change happens right now in the conversations we've just been having. And Joy, I'm with you. Culture is shifting. Here we are. So, and I'm with Laz Dana, wishing everybody well for a good holiday season into next year. Our next session, Willis Long and Friends will be January 18th. So stay tuned. But again, thanks to Cate, Joy, and Ellie for joining Dana and I today. Be well. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you so much.
Take care.